Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City of Richmond's informal meeting. And again, for those I have not seen, Happy New Year. Uh, Madam Clerk, if you will provide the chamber emergency evacuation announcement followed by the roll call, and we'll proceed to docket from there.
Upon activation of the emergency alarm signal, all persons should immediately exit the building. Please use the exits to the left or right front of the council chamber or the west, east or west stairwell outside the rear doors of the chamber. Do not use elevators or escalators. After exiting the building, security will direct everyone down 9th Street to the assembly area located inside the former public safety building parking lot. Able persons should assist visually and hearing impaired visitors with exiting the building. And Madam President, for the record, all members are in attendance this evening with the exception of Councilor Jones and Lynch. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let's proceed with the docket review.
Starting with the consent agenda, item number 1, ordinance 2025-150. Planning Commission recommended approval with an amendment, and that paper is scheduled to be amended later this evening and then continue to the January 26th council meeting. Item 2, ordinance 2025-258. Planning Commission recommended a continuance of this item, and so this item is to be continued until February the 9th. Item 3, ordinance 2025-259. This paper is to be continued until February the 9th, awaiting an amendment. Items 4 through 6, ordinance 2025-262, 263, and 264. Committee referral was waived on all 3 items. All will be retained on this evening's consent agenda. Items 7 through 10, ordinance 2025-265, 267, 268, and 269. Planning Commission recommended approval. Item 11, ordinance 2025-270. Planning Commission recommended a continuance, so this item is to be continued to the February 9th council meeting. Items 12 through 15, ordinance 2025-271, 272, 273, and 274. Planning Commission recommended approval. Item 16, ordinance 2025-275. Education and Human Services Standing Committee recommended approval. Item 17, ordinance 2025-276. Education and Human Services Standing Committee recommended a continuance, so this item is to be continued to the February 23rd council meeting. Item 18, ordinance 2025-277. Education and Human Services Standing Committee recommended approval. Item 19, Resolution 2025-R043. This paper is scheduled to be amended later this evening and then considered. On the regular agenda, we have item 20, ordinance 2025-215. Planning Commission recommended denial. Item 21, ordinance 2025-231. Planning Commission also recommended denial. However, this paper is to be continued to the February 23rd council meeting. And lastly, on this evening's docket is item 22, resolution 2025-R050. This paper, Finance had previously recommended forward this item with no recommendation. This paper was amended at the December 15th council meeting. It's currently being retained on this evening's regular agenda. And Madam President, those are all the items on this evening's docket.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, we will proceed with the referral of service delivery issue item, City Administration, a discussion presentation by Mr. RCAO, Mr. Donald, Janitorial and Security Contract Analysis. Okay, thank you. Welcome, Mr. Donald.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
All righty. Well, good afternoon, council president and members of council. Wanted to give you, did you want me to just go through the presentation? I know we submitted it. I didn't know if you had questions ready or if you just wanted us to go through it quickly.
Why don't we go through the presentations
Okay.
and we'll then entertain questions.
All righty. Well, I know we wanted to have an analysis, and we followed the resolution to look at two different options: updating existing contracts or bringing janitorial and security services in-house, which to a certain extent was a procurement exercise. But we also, I think there's a human resources component as well, as we think about how to kind of manage if we were to bring that piece in-house today. And I don't think she's started today, our new HR director. I know we provided the notice, but she's in what do you call it, onboarding training today. So she was not able to attend. I think they've got another 45 minutes or so left, but I wanted to introduce you to her. So we'll make sure to do that. I don't know if the appropriate piece is kind of how we do it in small groups individually or just to have her come before the next meeting, but I'm sure y'all will let us know your preference. But that's one piece that I think her expertise might also help us as we continue this conversation. I think just bottom line up front, most feasible option is likely the updating of existing contracts because just most clearly, if you look at something, if you do something as a staff member and you bring it in house, it's almost like an annuity that you pay out over and over and over again. And, the cost of services for an employee is a fixed cost if you were to do it through contract. So for cost purposes, with the various cost pressures that the city has, it makes the most sense to coordinate something like this through the contractual avenue. But that would be the preference, or that would be the one that makes the most sense. But I think it really probably requires a little bit more analysis either way, and the presentation will show that. So just quick analysis: if you do the updating of existing contracts, which would be that fixed cost scenario based on the contract terms, labor costs, and activities expected in future years that are actually defined when you do a contract. For security, we have already made the change to be able to have new all-arm contracts that is kind of aligned with the city minimum wage that began on November 1st of this past year, around the time that we submitted this presentation. So, that tells you what the additional cost will be, and so you can see the impact there. And I'll get into some of the ancillary costs that we also have to think about. When you raise that cost, people deliver the same service, but likely with less employees. The janitorial contract, and looking at it, if the 3.8 million, raising it to the $20 an hour, just the numbers increase is about 4.9 million. And so that, you would have to amend contracts and make some additional adjustments. Again, that's the updating additional contracts, and that is just a bare bones assessment. There are plenty of other things that you have to look at and consider, and you also would be going into a negotiation. You can't just amend the contracts without, any parameters. In bringing those activities in-house, then there's a little deeper dive again that has to happen, but just generally the cost, as you would see, would start off. And again, we kind of missed the FY26 activity. So these are estimates based off of the decisions that you have made collectively, beginning with the FY26 budget, and what those increased costs would be on through FY31. You continue, if you look at it, just a breakdown of the increased cost that I showed on the previous screens. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but I know we've provided this. So you've had a look at the total increase of about 1.1 million. But what it also does is, the increase reflects that expanded service scope as well, and then the higher wage standards. But it also kind of results in less officers as well. And so that's something that you have to consider, some of the inadvertent activities that occur. You've got to raise that standard. And so in the negotiation process, as well as when you look at what is provided by the actual contractor, they may make some additional adjustments. Go to the next slide, and looking at if you updated the existing janitorial contract, just looking at the minimum cost and none of the ancillary activities, you've got an additional annual cost increase of about a little bit under 1.1 from where we are today. And so you'd have to do a formal contract amendment to implement that requested change. And then, increasing the hourly wage may have some additional impacts that we talked about, that may affect employees, looking at things like Social Security benefits, which I know we've talked about in this forum before, as well as Medicaid and some of the supplemental income and other assistance programs. Now, helps people move towards self-sufficiency, which, I think is a clear support, but also adding in some of those other resources to make sure that folks are prepared and able to budget effectively and with the loss of some of these benefits, because if you raise the wages, some of those benefits and the eligibility goes away. And again, I think one thing to point out is that those would also be outside of our realm of control and responsibility, because that is doing it through a contract. So it may impact John or Jane Doe, and we would not know about it. We would not, have the ability to manage it or control it. But, those activities might occur if you make that adjustment, because again, this is a private sector employee, and how they manage their day-to-day business and operations is kind of in their realm of control. The additional ancillary cost of in-house services is also something to just make the council aware of. So we were able to do this assessment. So, if you bring on somebody internally, the things that you get in fixed cost also have to be taken on by the city. So some of these things are, again, assumptions that are made based on what we know about their model and what we require. So vehicles, I think the assumption was to, and again, these things could change and it could become more costly or less, but the analysis bore that the cost of a van and 3 SUVs is a little more than $150,000. You'd have to have initial supplies to be able to provide support beyond what we do now, a little bit more than $400,000. And then, of course, you've got to have, your uniforms and all of those other things that are supplied and provided, estimated at a little under $35,000. And that brings you back to around $600,000 in additional costs beyond those for the wages. Again, security, initial, and recurring costs for 107 individuals, using the same type of analysis if you brought it internally, because you already had some of those things in place. We just made some assumptions and added an additional 72,000. Now, of course, that doesn't include, because when this analysis was done, these were not armed guards, I believe, at the time. So you also have to include training, the weapons, whatever is, required and necessary. So you would add those to the analysis. And so looking at just some of the additional considerations, so all of the factors that we looked at and considered at this. So if you bring these services in-house, you add about 230 employees that require new supervisory administration and HR benefits capacity. And so, we're talking about the employees themselves, but not necessarily the apparatus by which we would manage them and assist in delivering services. So you have to include that as well. And then, as benefits increase, which I think people have seen with these skyrocketing premiums and other things like that, we just finished our assessment, or at least initial assessment, as we prepare for the upcoming budget. If you add 227 employees, plus the other administrative needs, you'd have to consider that as well. You would also have to ensure that HR has the actual capacity to be able to manage them. So, is there any additional employee or support, any additional employees or additional support that might be needed, would need to come into this process as well. Risk, with armed security, we are, of course, looking and have looked. Again, we're looking at this now in the future, but some of these activities have been made and went into our analysis. Armed security increases liability exposure, and insurance costs go up as well due to the weapons certifications, insurance, and compliance requirements. Even when you amend contracts, you have to look at those things. But of course, if you brought them in-house, you would have to consider those more because you take on that liability and those activities. The annual wage and benefit adjustments that traditionally the city has provided to its employees also would need to be considered as costs that you would take on if you brought folks inside, including, I would, in looking and just doing a quick analysis, it's pretty clear that most of these staff members would qualify under collective bargaining commitments. So you could kind of fit them into our current model of collective bargaining, which, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just a cost that you have to be able to account for. So it's not just the base cost, it's also the increase that would come with collective bargaining for the contracts that are already there, as well as the future costs for future agreements. And so in addition, that's a portion of our contracted workforce. And from what I have seen, which again, I think is a quality piece from both past and current administrations, as well as past and current council, is that the holistic look at how you do things. And so ensuring that as you make a decision, we're either including everyone or excluding everyone, but piecemealing it may cause some additional unintended consequences. Whereas you bring a portion in and leave a portion out without rationale or reasoning, it can cause some additional issues. And so that consideration also has to be made. With that, based on the timing in which we had to provide it, the thought was to leave things status quo for now. We are in the budget deliberation process. The exercise has for sure given us some, and I don't want to, status quo was like the best reasoning at the time, or the best wording, but I would call it almost a status quo plus. And that is, this is the standard of where we are. And when it comes down to the crux, from what I understand, it is ensure that our workforce, both internal as well as contracted, are treated as best as possible, compensated as best as possible. And when we talk about being a model employer, let's make sure we're inclusive of everyone. And so the analysis has been done just on the base cost. And the base cost, I'm not crazy. I know it may look prohibitive, but that doesn't mean that there are not things that we can do to support our workforce, including those that are contractual. And so we're looking a little further into the analysis now to understand what that could be. Whether it's the lens by which we do our contracting, I don't know if I didn't get to include it in this one because again we submitted this I believe well before the new year. I don't remember the date in which the conversation we began this conversation and we submitted it, but again before we moved into the new year, and so we've continued to work on this. But I would just close by saying, the costs, the first thing is looking at all of the contracts, all of them, not just the two that were highlighted here, to see if the features of the contract allow the city control to make sure we require some sort of, adjustments when necessary. I think the second part of it is, looking at what type of ancillary resources we might provide on our end to our contractors that might make their experience better, and then getting additional information on some of these ancillary effects that were pointed out, including, what happens. I had a chance to look back at some of the video and things of that nature from previous meetings. And I know it was a small but very important group that had some of these concerns and, requesting for us to look at this, which I think is appropriate. But how can we potentially make the contract environment better for them, as well as look at the impact of wages, but make sure they don't get cut out in the process? I think the worst thing that we can do is go from, let's say, 15 to, and I'm just using base numbers, from 15 to $20, and that results in 20 people from the same workforce being released from their duty, and the city pays, more money for that service. That wouldn't be, I think, the goal or the spirit of what we're looking for. And so it's a happy medium. And just in all honesty, while we haven't figured it all out, we have looked at some best practices to improve contracting. So I'll close with that. I hope that gave you, along with the wealth of information provided in the presentation, as well as the accompanying memo, the insights that you were looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Donald. Members, are there questions for Mr. Donald at this point? Councilwoman Gibson.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Donald. I appreciate the presentation, and I do think that this is a good conversation to start, and I'm thankful that we're having it. Some thoughts in terms of how to provide a more comprehensive story as we move forward. I think that one of the key pieces of information that I think is critical in this analysis is to see the actual salaries of these contracted workers now, so that we can compare it. Because at the end of the day, the reason why we're having this discussion is to ensure that when this body, prior to my time, voted to mandate a living wage for its employees, that that we weren't finding ways to circumvent that as it was convenient for us to do so, right? And so, if we've set the bar at $20 an hour as a living wage, I think it's important for us to know these contracted employees that are making below that, what are they making? It's not clear in the analysis to compare. The analysis does show the proposed salaries, but it doesn't show what the current one is, to make that comparison as to, what are we talking about, And I think that part of the cost, when we talk about the cost to us as a city, it's twofold. One are the dollars and cents that we are spending in terms of benefits and salaries, but also there are costs to the city in essentially perpetuating poverty because they're costs that we incur in the work that we do to support residents who are living in poverty. So I think in this analysis that is an important factor to consider as well. I have a question in terms of, so I guess, you know, I'm admittedly, I'm somewhat conflicted at the data that shows the $1.8 million cost for bringing it in-house, if I'm following correctly. You know, in many moons ago, I worked for a temp agency, and it was, I remember being I was a temp, and I remember when I learned that while I was making probably at the time like $10 an hour, that the agency was making 20. You know, it's essentially double what my wage was what the you know the temp wage, the agency's wage was. And I believe that still holds true. It's essentially double the cost. So in that scenario, if we're paying a temp or a contracted employee $15 an hour, that means that, you know, the actual cost we're paying is at least $30 an hour. And so if we were to bring that person from $15 an hour to $20 an hour, and then I think the typical cost of benefits is around 30%. And I'll put a pin on that because I want to talk more about the cost of our benefits. It's important to understand. But assuming that it is the average of 30% of the salary, so that would bring a person making $20 an hour to about $26 an hour, which then leaves us, you know, if we were to bring someone in-house who was making $15 an hour, we're paying $30 to $26 an hour. That's a net savings of $4 an hour to the city. Now, so given that, I think it's really important to have an analysis that shows very clearly and look, it would be helpful actually to just see the contracts. Because generally, I would presume that what our contracts are based on has to do with the actual pay of the employee, of the contracted employee, right?
Are contracts here not public? I'm curious because I didn't know you needed them. We can get you that.
Mr. Donald, yes, if you would,
Yeah.
that would be helpful. And then, Ms. Gibson, your question, is that the final question or?
I'm still, yeah.
Okay.
I have more to say.
I'm trying to keep capturing. I'm
yeah.
writing down. I'm writing it down.
So generally what I would presume, right, is that we've received a contract that says if you're going to hire approximately this many employees making this rate, and their take-home pay or their experience level is this much, right? And that tallies up to whatever the total amount is, right? And so it would be helpful to see that so that we can see exactly what those employees are making right now in terms of take-home pay. You know, now, assuming the analysis also didn't confirm, I believe, if I'm following it correctly, that there are, you know, looking specifically at the custodians, for instance, it says that the number of employees is based on, let's see, the approximate number of contractors for custodial services is 125. So it would be helpful to just have as confirmation, are we hiring 125 people right now? Are we fully staffed?
Got it.
Yeah.
So can I, because you asked a few, so I want to make sure I got them all. So one, the cost of each employee. And so part of that is you've got multiple employers. I mean, you've got the contractor who has multiple employers. So I think we're making an assumption that just using the 4 council members, I think we're making an assumption that Councilmember Breton is always stationed at the city of Richmond. The rate may be the same, but I don't think the contract is going to require, because again, we're not managing. So I'll use Councilmember Robertson as an example. Since we're not managing Councilmember Robertson, we're managing a requirement that the contractor Jane Doe is providing X service that meets the need of, let's say, 5 security guards to stand around, the chambers. They may feel that today with Councilmember Breton, the next day with Councilmember Gibson, and I would imagine, but I don't think we can control their rate, because they may be, and I mean in this instance, they may do it to where for the Richmond slot, you get $15 an hour, but the state does not have the same requirements that the city of Richmond does. And for the state, it may be $16 an hour, it may be $12 an hour. But when you work for the city of Richmond, you get paid for that slot. When you're assigned to the the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, then you receive that rate. And so that type of back office activity is reserved for the market, because if you decide, let's say company Jane Doe again has a contract with both, again, using that example, they may have a day where inauguration is coming and you have to do something extra at, let's say, both locations, and you don't have to do the same at another, and you pull and move folks. But their ability to deliver the service is a little bit different. And that's also why the cost of services for bringing something in-house is also greater, because in that one, you're also incentivizing, and again, I'm just using this example, Councilmember Breton, but you're incentivizing Councilmember Breton to report every day to, protect the chambers. So I think understanding more of what you are requesting would be good to know. But I think based on what is in the resolution and analysis that you asked, and I don't think it's something that's over. And so you've asked for something, you want additional information as a council, we can keep looking at it. And I think we should, to make sure we want to be a model employer. So we should continue to do everything we can to do that. But I think I listed at the time, I had been here, 3 months, looked at it and said, hey, here's your analysis, and staff has done a great job on it. We've all come together great. But here are some unintended consequences that we should continue to look at, because we have to solve for those as well. And so the purpose of having quote unquote status quo is that if you make a change now and we boost the number up to XXX, and then 30 people have to be let go, that's a problem with our service delivery, and that's not intended for, I think, what you want.
So,
I
Mr.
think, yeah.
Yes. Go on. I'm sorry, didn't.
No, I wanted to make sure I holistically answered her question. And then, again, it's also the impact on others, which we may or may not care about. I think that was one thing that from your line of questioning came up. What do our county partners pay? What does the state pay? What do others pay? Because that's also impacts the market. And so we also have to look at the quality of workforce that we will receive, the quantity, who does business with us and who doesn't. I think there's a whole atmosphere that these questions, not the question that you asked per se, but just the broad question that the council asks, is that we need to understand what the environment looks like. And with 3 months, I don't have an analysis of that for you.
So, Mr. Donald,
Yep.
just to follow up in terms of additional information, and more will come. We have some more questions as well. Copies of the contracts, as was requested. more of a comparative analysis, if you will, with surrounding. Her last thing was city, county, state. And then looking at what the actual salary is, plus the administrative costs or additional fee benefits, back office costs, those kinds of things. If that could also be,
So I think we need a little bit more guidance
Okay.
from the council.
we can do that.
What I mean by that is because this is one activity that we're looking at, but it impacts everything. So, you've got, I'm just going to call it 1.1 billion in the pot. And we've got our employee costs that are set for the most part. You know what the increase is on the front line. I think you're going to get a proposal and you address just your entire workforce. Then you have your contracted services. And so that's another area that, we'll be looking at, especially based on this resolution. I think it'll be baked into how we address that in the mayor's budget proposal. But then, it impacts these other things as well. Remember, you have this 1.1 billion and 50% of that is pretty much accounted for what you've already, decided, paid, et cetera. The amount that you have left is, you got RPS, you got all of those other things. Your portion of the pot, I think what you're asking for is to analyze it, but what would be helpful is kind of what answers are we looking to get? So it's, hey, we're analyze this. Well, yeah, okay, here's an analysis, but analyze it so that we can help make a decision, or we can help point you towards a decision that results in what? I think that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Councilmember Robertson, questions?
Sure, Ms. Gibson.
I haven't finished, but I'm happy to, you can circle back to me.
Yes, if you would.
Mhm.
All right, I just appreciate the list of questions that you have presented, and many of them kind of touch on the kinds of things that we were really concerned about, as to even the reason why this analysis and the hope of what the outcome of this would be. The lowest paid people in the city of Richmond in certain job positions. And what we are what we have been comfortable with paying for certain jobs. The last article that I read in the paper as it relates to our own DPW staff, that are making less than $50,000 a year, requires for those employees to, in order to just survive, probably have to have at least 2 jobs, if not 3, just to make things work, put food on the table. And so the initiative here is many of the employees have been hired by the city, and the city has made some decisions to go to contracted services versus in-house employment services, and that at the cost of the persons that are not full-time employees with benefit packages, but to a consultant, to a contracting firm. And we all know that we pay for contract services greater than what maybe the employee receive. That's to be expected. There's overhead costs. There are all the things that are associated with that. My greatest concern with this is the people that I see every day that I know are struggling, really, really struggling just to survive. And many of them, one in particular that I'm personally speak to frequently, that an illness with no benefits puts them in a position of not being able to pay their water bill, not be able to continue to pay for their health care, not be able to pay for their prescriptions, and they are contract employees. And so it's really, it feeds into our poverty pipeline. It supports our poverty pipeline. And so the question that is before us, recognizing the cost that's associated with that, but understanding the difference in what that cost is. And, I'm sure that even with contract services, we're only paying for the guys that do service for the city of Richmond, not the ones that may be working
Oh,
for the,
no, that was clear. Yeah.
working for the city one day and the state the next. We're not paying for that.
No.
And so I want to make sure that we are not confusing that, and because it
Yeah.
gets easily to be confused.
Mhm.
And that's the company's business as to where they assign Jane or Joe.
I think that's.
But that's not for us. We still ain't paying no more. I don't care if it's Jane
That is
or
correct.
Joe.
That is,
Right.
or less.
Okay. So our
Less.
cost is fixed. Yeah, our cost is fixed,
Correct.
whether it's Jane or Joe. So I don't want to confuse that, a lot, the analysis that, or the example that is put out there. But what is true, what I think is very true, is that the wages that are being paid for these contract services, it would be good to also provide us with whether or not there are some other blanket contracts by definition that we are contracting services. I don't know what they would be, whether they are engineering services that are blanket contract, whether there's planning concept. Probably not. I would think that most of those is a separate independent contract that we go after. But if there are other contract services that I'm not aware of, we know about security, we know about janitorial, we know about maybe even some park and rec services that we hire temporary that may go through an agency. We know about maybe some DPW that may go through a blanket contract service. So if there are others, I think the council should know what they are as well. Madam Chair, so I also just comments that I want to put out there. In addition to that, over the past years, we have significantly increased employment in some departments for the city. And they are in-house employees.
Mhm.
In the past 11, 12 months, or 12, 13 months, several of our in-house employees have been terminated for no cost, but just a part of reorganization or whatever. That this council is not fully aware of. I unfortunately had the experience of running into some employees that have informed me that, on Friday I was called into the office and told that my job, I was terminated, no costs, no benefits, whatever sick leave, holiday pay I may have accumulated, I get paid for that, no benefits, I'm an insulin user. I can't just do without my health care. And so council do not have a full appreciation for what workforce really is costing us, how much added personnel is being added to departments by the administration making a decision to create new departments, add, 10, 12 new employees. So when we try to make these right decisions to right size everything and be honorable and respectful to employees, even if they continue to be contracted versus in-house, the other decisions that we are making about employees seems to not is factored into the justification for how we find money for one versus not able to find money for certain other classifications. And that's problematic. That's problematic for me, especially with initiatives that I've taken so far to make sure that we provide a poverty initiative, created the Office of Community Wealth Building, reduction in poverty. So, Madam Chair, President, I'm a little concerned that this study and the analysis is bringing some really hard information to us, but I'm not sure that council has assigned this maybe to one of our standing committees to really deep dive into this, to really understand the line of questions that Ms. Gibson, that I have, I'm sure other council members as well. And I think that it almost require us to, assign it to either a committee or whatever to really do the deep dive so we can look at the different options that we are making as it relates to workforce that are not being brought to the table. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I just make one comment really quickly?
Yes,
please?
and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Gibson.
Yeah, so I do think because in those comments, I heard a bunch of different things. And so I think it again, really, from the administration standpoint, we kind of got to know what you're asking for and looking for. Like, what decision are we trying to make? I think, I'm not sure about the employees that were let go or, in a department if they decided to change their model. Now that I think we would talk about, I would know about it. We would talk about council or whatever, but, I'm sure there are employees. I had a chance to sit with one Sunday and gave me some great insights on his thoughts for, I know you mentioned community wealth building. I think it's called Bolo's Chicken or whatever, was over there with him and got to talk to him, and he gave me some great insights on some things he'd love to see. So I think they were valid, but also shared some things with me. I said, I know what's going on there. You may not be aware, but that's actually a little different than what you might be thinking. I think those type of individual activities are something that is a little bit different. But I think for this piece, because what you're asking about is, what you asked for in the resolution is, do you bring something in-house or do you do a contract? What we did not ask is there something else? Is there anything we can do to improve the quality of experience for those contractors initially but also maintain their work capacity, increase their costs, maybe better benefits, whatever those things are you would like to see. I mean, I think getting some insight on just what we're seeking to do would be helpful, because otherwise we'll be stuck with analysis paralysis. I can analyze it from what you put in the resolution, but if you don't tell us what you want to make a decision on or have the administration make a decision on, we'll continue to look at the situation and not get to the crux of what you would really like to do, which it sounds like you want to improve the experience, the plight in, life and pay and all of those ancillary things for not only our employees, which you have made some strong support for through the CBA, but you would also like to do that for the contractor. I think if you point us in that direction of what you would specifically like, we can get you information that helps you see either what we're doing to do that or make your statements through your resolutions or other things on what you would like to see. So I would just offer that because I think it would be helpful to the administration.
And we certainly can comply with that, Mr. Donald. Councilwoman Gibson, if I can round the wagon, Councilwoman Trammell's not had opportunity. I'm trying to make sure we get everybody in at least once before I go around. Councilmember Trammell.
Thank you. I just want to say that every time we have a budget year and we try to reduce the real estate tax, we get voted down. And I don't know who is thinking about our citizens, especially the homeowners that pay these high taxes, so that we can give money away to this and that and everything else. Because I know this weekend I saw about 45 people, and all they were screaming about was utilities have gone up. Who's going to help us with our utilities? And then we're talking about they're going to go up again. Then they were telling me, oh my God, my mortgage went up because it looks like the assessments have gone up. And we all know we're not dumb. We know that once you start building, your assessments don't go down, they go up. I've never seen the assessments go down when we build stuff. And I know in my district, I have 11 developers right now that are building. So we got so much money coming in. I don't even know why we're having this discussion. I don't know why we just can't just give it to them. And let's talk about our retirees that have not gotten any money, nothing, since Governor Wilder was here. He gave them a COLA, which is a cost of living raise. That's been through 2 different mayors. That's 16 years. And now our mayor 1 year. So that's 17 years. What are we, doing for our retirees? So I was kicking them to the curb, and our homeowners kicking them to the curb. And like they said this weekend, you make me pay, pay, pay. And it's not fair that we don't get, that we feel like that all of our money is just, taken away and given to ones that have not given their service to the city. And also, I know that us council members are not allowed to get into personnel. I have been told that not once, but many times in the past year that I can't talk about who just got let go or who went or who didn't stay. So I don't even know why we're even having that kind of discussion, because we know the charter prevents that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Trammell. Councilwoman Gibson, and then I'd like to talk about our path forward. Mr. Donald, with some follow-up, please.
Thank you, Madam President. So yeah, I think in terms of the objective, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. And I would venture to guess I'm not alone here. The objective is to ensure that we are able to operate efficiently, that we are ensuring that when our residents are paying more for to be able to live here, that's translating into providing enhanced services. And so I'm determined to look under every rock. The other objective I have is to ensure that we are also supporting our residents by ensuring that those residents, especially those that live in the city, are making a living wage. Because if we are, continuing the cycle of poverty, we're going to pay for it either in wages or we're paying for it in the services. Mm-hmm. So, I will be clear. My perspective, contracted employees make sense when it's temporary. When you have a temporary need, it doesn't make sense to hire somebody on board because you're not going to need that into perpetuity. There's some unique expertise that's needed for a set moment in time. But when the need is indefinite, as it is with security guards and custodians, as we're talking about today, I'm not sure that the argument is there to pay for contracted services, which are not inexpensive. When we procure things, the objective with procurement is to have it be as cheap as possible. And the company, though, needs to make money, right? And so at the end of the day, either we're paying more or our employees are getting paid, those employees are getting paid less. So what my objective in looking at the analysis that's been completed is to make sure that we're very clear on what those assumptions are, to make sure that the analysis is fair. I think that there are some assumptions that I'm not clear on. I'm not clear on the number of contracted employees that we have now hired in the document that's been created. I'm not clear on exactly what those employees are making today. And I'm also not clear on what is driving the benefit cost, which is included in the analysis. looking at the analysis, you've got a $41,000 salary for the custodians, those kind of base custodians. And then basically, then the counterpart benefit cost is $27,000 per employee for their benefits. That works out to about 66%, which is considerably higher than average, and is also higher than RPS, which I believe they have many of our same benefits. So I'm unclear why the benefit cost for an RPS employee is around 39-40%, and we have allocated in this analysis a 66% benefit cost. So I think it's important to understand exactly what's behind the numbers in the analysis. I think that seeing the contracts will make it much easier to be able to parse out those comparisons. And ultimately, I think that there is some possibility to be able to either pay people better or to save more as a city. And I think that we owe it to residents to be able to take that analysis to completion to that end.
Got it. So I got a couple of things because I know that two council members went at the same time. I think a couple of things to highlight. So one, well, actually three, because I know Councilmember Robertson as well. So the first piece is, it is not that we pay for the state or some other entity when they're there. The point is that they would highlight, and I appreciate you providing me an opportunity to clarify that. If it was, I think it was clear because I saw folks nodding their head as if they understood, but don't know how it reports out to the public. So if a person, when you're managing a business in this private sector, and again, I know y'all know this is edification of the public, private sector, these folks are in slots. When you're in slot 1, you might make $12 an hour. When you're in slot 2, you may make $15 an hour. To my knowledge, and it may be different in the Commonwealth, we can't control the business model of the actual businesses. So again, someone may make, let's say, $20 an hour working for the city, whereas they may go to the state or the county or wherever else, and when they're in that slot, they might make less. There is a impact on the business, which we don't necessarily know, the business and the employee. It's just an observation. We don't know what that is. Maybe we can dive into it. Maybe we can. That's something I've got to go back and ask and see how we would calculate and do all of that stuff here. The other piece of that, I think the Councilmember Trammell, highlighted something that's very important, is that you've got a variety of decisions that are being made. One is, can we give our retirees who have, worked here and put in their 20, 30, or whatever the rules were during the time that they retired, can we add supplements to them? So that's a different cost pressure than what this is asking, but it is all coming out of the same pot. And I think I would, and I know sometimes we agree, sometimes we don't, but I fully agree with you that if we're going to have a long-term service, the goal is to be able to, either have those things internally and allot for those costs, or, you decide on your contracting model. I think I, along with the mayor and the administration, inherited the model that we have. And so I think we're focusing on the how, but not the what, because it is more so, are you asking us to look at the model? Because it's not I can give you a ton of information about this one issue. It still doesn't address, because there are still other people who are other contracts that we have for service that are not being looked at. And do you address one and not address the other? What is our model? For security, for instance, there are other ancillary circumstances. I'll use Atlanta, where I just came from, for example. The Atlanta model does not use contracted security officers. And you have, but you've also heavily invested in a variety of things to make it fully, police officers that provide this service. So when you look at that, they do for two specialty purposes. I just thought about that. They do use a model for two specialty purposes. But again, generally, it's the model that you're talking about. But I think looking at just Richmond's history, and I'm just looking at the last 3 years of information that I've had a chance to dissect in my short time here, the bulk of the ability to hire police in large swaths to be able to remove, let's say you have 125 security officers, you've not been able to hire, and when I say you, I'm just saying the city, have not been able to hire 125 at one fell swoop in a year or even over 3 years. And so that requires the supplement. So those type of things have to be brought into play as well. So again, understand all of the different things that we are discussing here, but it is not a cut and paste analysis. I think it is, if you're looking at security, especially now that we have armed security, if you were to replace them and bring them in-house, a nominal question would be, hey, why aren't we just adding to our police force and having them do it? There's reasons for that, including your ability and capacity. So again, I think understanding the what we're trying to accomplish will very much help us with the how and getting you the information you need. So thank you for that insight on looking at not just this contract, but also I think you mentioned retirees and the rate and making sure we have enough resources to do some of the things that I think this council member inquired about. But it is both, I think, we have to look at. And so understanding that would be helpful on what your desire is.
Mr. Donald, we will be vigilant to get you the additional questions that members would like to have answered. And I do hear what you're articulating in terms of the model. And so trying to provide greater clarity there. I think as we looked at the janitorial, we did all or nothing, but was there an incremental opportunity in between? So we move systematically until we get to here versus just throwing that out. But I will ask Mr. Warren, our Chief of Staff, to certainly get with our members. You've heard the questions that have come up from the various members, and we'll get that to you. But all of it is to help make informed decisions as we're entering the budget phase here in our organization. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Members, with that, I believe that will conclude the agenda for our informal session. This meeting now stands adjourned. Thank you.